Thumbs up. All right. Good morning. I can see Bamidele, Oluwatobi. I can see Judith. You're welcome. I can see Frances. I can see Tosi, Nina, Ehimien. I can see David, Chukwudube, Dumebi, Shile, Oluwaseun, Kelvin, Sam, Chinedu, Oluwaseun. We have two Oluwaseun's. Ayomide, Adenike, Joe, Temitope. We have Nadai as well. I hope I was able to get through to everyone. Oluwatosin. Yeah, you're all welcome. You are all welcome. And, the purpose of this boot camp is actually to give you a taste of what your transition journey will look like. I saw your responses, right? Some of you are looking to transition into tech. Some of you are in tech already. You want to move into a different part of tech, right? So wherever you are on that journey, we are here to take you on that journey. So this is a teaser. See it as, just having insights as to, what your journey would look like. So please, I want you to just pay attention to everything that will happen today. Expect the best. At some point, we'll divide you into breakout rooms so that you can get more practical with what we're doing. Just be patient. There are people to support you. One of the things that you would enjoy being with us at Cloud Booster is the level of support that you get. So we have people on the call who are facilitators. They are here to help you. So just be patient. Give yourself time, right? We'll do quiz as well. Make sure you pay attention so that you can score high in your quiz. So we're here for you. It's all about you today. It's all about what your cloud journey would look like. So as we go along, if you have any questions, just feel free to put it in the chat box. We typically take it at the end, right? And I just need you to embrace the entire experience. Don't be intimidated. Some of you have never heard anything about cloud computing before. So it's your first time, even though you've been in tech for many years. Regardless of where you are, please don't be intimidated. Just taking everything that we have in store for you today, and we can't wait to see you transition and become what you want to be in this world of technology. So I'm just going to go straight into my very first lecture today. So we have two lectures, and then you have your lab session, you have quiz, we'll discuss the schedule as we go along. And as much as today it's half a day that we're spending with you, we usually have breaks in between, so that you're not overwhelmed, you're not too tired. And that's our model at Cloud Booster generally. We don't just keep you sitting down for hours. We know it can get boring. So please, when we're having a session, pay attention. You would have a break. You always have a 10 minutes break every 1 hour, every now and then. So you can use your phone during that time. So please don't use your phone while we are actually doing the good stuff and the real thing. And also, if you can turn on your camera as well, we always encourage it because it shows that you're with us, right? Hopefully, some of you are not just lying down on your bed and just listen to what they have to say. We also need you to join with your laptop, just like Ife has said. The work you're doing today, you need the laptop, not your mobile phone, because you're going to build solutions on the cloud, okay? So hopefully you can get that sorted before we get to that session. Your first lecture today is Introduction to Cloud Computing. Some of you have joined our webinars before. Some of you have, you've heard me speak before. Some of you have never heard me. You're seeing me for the first time. Regardless of where you are, just follow us up on this journey. So today, for the first part of my lecture, we're going to be looking at what cloud computing is, right? What is the importance of learning cloud computing? Why do you need to learn it? Why AWS specifically? Because that's what we're going to be teaching you today, and that's what we teach our Cloud Booster as well. And then we'll look at the AWS global infrastructure, and then we also look at how you select your AWS region, right? So let's go. Now, what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is a technology that allows users to access computing resources like servers, storage, databases, and application over the internet on a pay-per-use basis. I know that is a mouthful, but let us break it down and take it one after the other, right? So the key thing about cloud computing is that you're able to access things like servers, storage, database, and applications over the internet on a pay-per-use basis. One thing that comes to your mind when you hear pay per use or pay as you go, I'm sure you think of your data plan, right? Whether you're in Nigeria, UK, Japan, wherever you are, you always have an option where you want to subscribe to the internet. Do you want to pick a monthly package? Do you want to pick a daily package? Do you want to pick an annual package? Or do you want to pay as you go, right? So pay as you go means that you're only paying for what you use. So if you look at this image on my right, you can see that with cloud computing, you want to use a server, you literally just pay for what you use on your what you're using for the server. You want to you want to access storage, you just pay for what you use. Everything that you're using on cloud computing, you literally just pay as you go. So imagine, some of you have been in tech for many years. Imagine if, for example, you just had a specific use case where you wanted to process a lot of data. Maybe your company, they said, can you process this data for me? This data is beyond what you can use Excel sheets for. You need a database, you need a data, data application to help you process the data. And you also need a lot of computing power, of which your laptop doesn't have that computing power. Would you now go and say you want to go and buy a whole new laptop because you want to process data? Just one task. In that particular scenario, what you need to do is you can come to a global cloud provider, which I'll come to shortly, and then you just spin up a computer. You literally go to AWS, spin up a server, spin up a virtual machine. You install whatever operating system. Do you want a Mac operating system? Do you want Windows operating system? You spin it up, and then you do whatever processing you want to do. And once you finish, you just destroy the computer. So all you get to pay for is how much time you have used that computer for. So imagine if everything you had to do in tech, you had to go and always buy every single thing that you need. And then after you don't need it again, it becomes a waste. So this is the problem that cloud computing is fixing, right? It's not every time that you always need servers, physical servers, large ones. You don't need all these things all the time. So the key thing is you're coming to a cloud provider and you're paying for just what you use. Another very good example, like I said here, we all use cloud every day. If you have a Netflix account, you use iCloud, you use Gmail, you use Spotify or Google. These are all functioning on some type of cloud computing. Think about Google Drive, for example. You have a picture stored on your laptop, upload it to a Google Drive, right? You don't need to have your laptop with you anytime to access the picture. As long as you have uploaded it to Google Drive, that image remains on Google Drive. All you need is access to internet. Travel to Australia tomorrow. All you need is your access to internet and login details, and you can access that image you have saved on Google Drive. So that is what cloud computing is. It's a technology that allows users to access computing resources like servers, storage, databases, application, all of these things. You can access it on the internet on a pay-per-use basis without the need for physical hardware. So this has completely transformed how we do things in the tech world. Is the infrastructure with many things are built these days, and it is the next level. This is the future. This is where everyone is right now. A lot of companies have had to migrate all their systems from data centers to the cloud. Haven't seen the advantage of cloud computing. Okay, are we together? If you understand what I've said so far, please give me a 1 in the chat box. Otherwise, give me a 2 if you're completely lost. So let me see your responses in the chat box. Are we still together? Are we together? Are we together? Okay, I can see some responses. Let me see. Okay, majorly ones. Okay, very, very good. Amazing. So let's go along. So if I've ever wondered, for example, how does Netflix manage over 220 million subscribers with millions of views and traffic every single day? They leverage cloud computing. Netflix, Instagram, Airbnb, all of these platforms, they leverage cloud computing. And then they now begin to layer other technologies, within cloud computing. Once you've moved your data to the cloud, you can then say you want to apply AI. You can say you want to apply machine learning and so many other cool technologies that are available on the cloud. Now, how was life before cloud? You can see this man having a headache because he's managing server rooms. Some of you have been in tech for a while and you're aware of server rooms, or you've been in an organization will be like, oh, that's our server room. Don't go there and all of that. Where you see large computers. With cloud computing, you don't need anything like this anymore, right? We don't need to use physical self-managed data centers. What you need to do is to build every single thing on the cloud, on somebody else's on a global cloud provider's platform, and that all your things are secure and safe there. Now, the biggest cloud providers that we have globally, we have three major ones. There are other ones, but these are the three major ones. We have Microsoft Azure, we have Amazon Web Services, we have Google Cloud Platform. In no particular order, people call them the MAG, right? These are the biggest ones. And you may have heard them before. Google Cloud Platform, they call it GCP. You might have heard of Microsoft Azure, which is called Azure. You might have heard of AWS, which is majorly what we're talking about. But these are the biggest cloud providers globally. Like I said, there are other ones. There's IBM Cloud, there's Alibaba Cloud, and all of that. But these are the ones that hold the biggest market share as of today. Things change very quickly in tech. So let's say as of today, this is what we have. Okay. Now, what are the advantages of cloud computing? Can somebody just give me what can you guys tell me in the chat box based on what I've described about cloud computing so far? What do you think are some of the advantages? Let me hear from you. Just put in the chat box. Mina says scale up. Yes, scalability. Very, very true. Because you're paying as you go, and you have unlimited space. I like what Kem is like. It makes life easier, which is true, right? Affordability is a key factor as well, especially in the context where you don't have to buy physical servers every single time you need to process data or use computers. You just go on the internet, log into a cloud provider, pay for, get what you need to do what you need to do, and then destroy it afterwards. And then that way you're not paying for what you don't need to pay for. Okay, someone they say scalability, very good. I can see Temi say reliability, very good. Better security, true, because the cloud providers actually pay attention to security, because now everyone is trusting them with all their data, so they pay attention to it, and it makes life easy as well. Okay, no downtime, very true. That's high availability, accessibility as well, true. Thank you. Security, so accessibility is to access data and applications from anywhere with an internet connection, enabling remote work and collaboration, true. That's very good. Happiness, it saves cost and it's secure, very good. You guys have mentioned some of the things I'll be talking about. So very good. I like the engagement. So with cloud computing, right? Organizations that are migrated to the cloud, they can now trade capital expense for variable expense. So just like I've been describing, right? They don't need to have physical data centers. You don't need to plan. I remember there's a company I used to work for. They actually got to a point where, they started getting so much. It was almost like they were doing real estate, because they had to keep buying land so that they could keep filling it up with servers and all of that. And luckily, when they heard about cloud computing, they moved every single thing they had into the cloud. It's a large organization, function in Canada, America, UK. So they said that they were so happy about the concept of cloud computing. Like our CEO built such a strong relationship with Andy Jassy, who is the AWS CEO, right? So it's so revolutionary. So that way you trade capital expense for variable expense. So these people don't need to start buying real estate, buying land, buying servers, buying all sorts of buildings just to keep computers, just because you have so much data, right? You just pay for what you use on the cloud. Organizations can also benefit from massive economies of scale, right? The more you use, the less you pay. And they can stop guessing about capacity. You don't need to know what you need up front. That's one of the major things about cloud computing, right? Before cloud computing, you cannot just come ahead and say, I plan. You have to have an idea. If you want to build an application, you want to build an e-commerce website, you have to think about, okay, how many users are going to use it? And then say, for example, you plan for 1,000 people. You will have bought your server and everything based on what you planned. And all of a sudden, guess what? You have 10,000 people trying to access your website. You didn't plan for 10,000 people. So you've guessed about capacity, and yet your guess was wrong. So with cloud computing, we don't have that problem, because even if, of course, you have parameters that you use to make decisions, but even if you've made a decision and you feel like, okay, I'm planning for 1,000 people, with cloud, you can say, even if I have 10,000 people, this is what you should do. So you can actually scale up, just like someone was saying, the scalability. So if, for example, you think you're going to have 1,000 people, I end up having 100 people, you're only going to pay for the 100 people, and you can scale down as well. So there's increase in speed and agility. You can easily go global in minutes. You can think of an idea today, and then you just deploy it on the cloud. A company like Airbnb, they built their entire solution straight on the cloud. Some organizations built it before cloud computing was a thing, and they had to move their systems to the cloud. an idea like Airbnb, because Airbnb, they don't need any physical infrastructure. It's all about connecting people and buildings and all of that. They were able to build solidly on the cloud, and that saved them a lot. So you can come up with an idea today and go global in minutes. I'll tell you about the AWS global infrastructure. So it's so revolutionary. Also, there's efficiency, just like some of you said, cost reduction, just like some of you said as well, as automatic software updates and integration, which of course you will have had to do manually if you were not on the cloud. Scalability, unlimited storage capacity, disaster recovery. Someone said it as well, so you can easily handle disaster recovery, because you can decide that if you build something on the cloud, you can decide that I want to deploy this thing in 2 different regions or 2 different availability zones. And if anything happens, the only thing that can really affect your data on the cloud, it has to be natural disaster. And even at that, it still doesn't mean that you're going to lose anything, because you will have built your solution as a good cloud architect. You will have made arrangements on the cloud for what if this region goes down, what happens? So because we have such features on the cloud where you can plan for every single thing possible, it's extremely difficult for you to lose anything on the cloud, right? So even in the case of natural disaster, you will have prepared for it, that, you know what, I'm going to deploy my solution in 2 different availability zones, which we'll talk about shortly. And that way you can easily handle data. So sorry, can you guys see my screen? Apparently I'm not sharing. Am I sharing my screen? I'm just seeing the chat that I'm not. Okay. I can see yeses. All right, cool. So thank you for confirming. So we also have, so moving on from the advantages of cloud computing, now let's go to learning cloud computing. Why is it important for you to learn? I'm sure you can already see that from what I've said, right? But it's just important for you to see the numbers. Do you know that the cloud computing market actually moved from $97 billion market in 2019 to $217 billion market in 2022? And it's now projected that by next year, right, 2026, it's going to be a $947 billion market. Now, you might be hearing all these numbers. What does that mean for you? What that means is that cloud is the future. A lot of organizations are investing in the cloud. A lot of people are saying they want to move their data to the cloud. A lot of people are saying that, you know what, we don't want to use data centers anymore. Let's actually leverage this revolutionary technology, which is cloud computing. With organizations investing more in the cloud, moving their data to the cloud, it means that there are more job opportunities available, because now we need more skilled professionals who actually know how to use cloud computing, which is why we're like, actually learn this thing. Like, my background is not in technology. I studied engineering at university. I thought, oh, it's science. They're completely different things. I mean, some of us on the call did mechanical engineering together, right? It's completely different. It's completely different from what we're doing in tech, but you have to look at where the future is and build around that. There's a lot of buzz around AI these days as well. It doesn't change the fact that we still need cloud computing, but you must be able to think about, okay, fine, since this is what everyone is talking about, how do I leverage what I know, or how do I move completely from where I am right now to where everyone is talking about? So people are talking about AI, cybersecurity, yes, data, cloud computing. These are the emerging technologies that will be here 10, 20, 30 years down the line. So if you're in a field that is going a kick, there's no need to be loyal to that field. Honestly, I'm sorry to say. I mean, I had a first class in mechanical engineering. I had a distinction in my master's in mechanical engineering. And I'm like, if mechanical engineering, fine, there's still some scope within mechanical. I mean, mechanical engineering is as if it's completely gone. But I just thought about, you know what? Tech is the future. So even though I enjoyed my degrees, I mean, no one forced me to do the course. I really wanted it, and I did it. I enjoyed it. I even did it at master's level. And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather stay in a field that is the future. And that's how I was able to transition into cloud. So you need to think about the future of whatever field you're in. Even right now in the field of mechanical engineering and many other fields, now they're integrating a lot of technology. So your background is not a waste. What we're saying is that you can leverage whatever background you have, whether you're already in tech or you're new into the world of technology, you can actually transition into cloud, because cloud is the future. It will be here in many years to come. This is where people are moving their data to. So, don't go out of relevance. So why AWS specifically, right? AWS is the biggest cloud provider as of today. I'm saying as of today because, like I said, things change very, very quickly in the world of tech. You'll be surprised that, because Microsoft Azure is coming up really fast behind AWS. So, I mean, I don't know what the future is, but anyone can catch up at any point in time or even overtake. So, as of today, AWS is the biggest cloud provider. It lays the foundation for you to learn and adapt to other cloud platforms because it's easy to comprehend and the documentation is also user-friendly. Now, some of you may ask, but why not Microsoft Azure? Why not Google Cloud Platform? The good thing is, if you learn AWS and if you learn from us at Cloud Booster, what we do, we teach you cloud computing, right? We don't just teach you within the context of AWS alone. AWS is just a platform that enables us to explain the cloud computing concept much clearer. Everything we teach you in AWS is applicable to Azure, is applicable to Google Cloud. So we have people who have learned AWS with us and they've gotten Microsoft Azure jobs, right? Or people that have Microsoft Azure certificate working in AWS. So I just want you to know that these cloud providers are very interchangeable. For example, we're going to do storage on the cloud today. We have what we call it S3 in AWS. Microsoft Azure will call it something else. We have a service called EC2 instance in AWS. That's what we call it. Microsoft Azure will call it virtual machines. These two services are exactly the same thing. So the fact that you're learning AWS does not limit you in any way, right? A company can hire you on the basis of, AWS, that's fine. You will figure out Microsoft Azure because it's the same thing. It's just for you to know what name are they using to call this particular service that I've learned, okay? So that's actually why we teach AWS. We know that it will lay a good foundation for you to learn other cloud platforms. And of course, it has a lot of documentation. They were the first. AWS actually introduced the world to this concept of cloud computing, and they're still leading in the field, right? So so we just trust AWS and we love them. But again, these days we even have people that are very hybrid, and people, in fact, most organizations, everyone is almost going into this hybrid model where they use AWS for some things, use Microsoft Azure for some things, and all of that too. These things are very interchangeable, is what I'm saying. So either way, that's why we teach AWS. Now, I'm moving towards the final part of my lecture. And if you have any questions, like I said, please put in the chat box. I'll take everything at the end. Now, if we look at the AWS global infrastructure, right, I just want to shed a bit more light on this. We have what we call, within the AWS global infrastructure, we have what we call an AWS region. And an AWS region is a geographical area in a country. So for example, country England, a geographical area within that country can be London, right? And Amazon currently has 37 regions globally. So at the moment, and these are some of the regions that AWS has. So you can see Cape Town, for example, in South Africa, you can see London, you can see Ireland in Europe, you can see Frankfurt, Germany, you can see Sao Paulo, you can see North Virginia in the USA, so Amazon actually has all of these regions all over the world. And these are countries, these are geographical areas within a country where AWS actually functions. This is very important for you to know. And then we also have what we call availability zones, right? Availability zones, or AZs, are isolated data centers located within specific regions. And this is what helps to ensure that cloud customers have a stable connection to a cloud service in a geographical zone that is closest to them. So I'm sure you can see this thing that looks like server room, which I talked about earlier, that, we've moved away from that. Now we have global cloud providers, right? So the truth is that behind what the global cloud providers are doing are actually rooms like this, are buildings like this. So what we're saying is that we don't want individual companies and organizations to be the one managing all of this. It's too much stress for them. I mean, what business does Netflix have with server rooms when Netflix is supposed to be producing good movies that we enjoy? Netflix is a media streaming company. They're not a tech company. But because they are delivering movies to people all around the world, in everything, like, they unavoidably use technology. They're heavily powered by technology. But Netflix leveraging cloud computing actually runs fully on AWS. So Netflix doesn't have to think about, where are we going to build our data center? Where do we need to store our movies? They use AWS. They're storing everything on AWS. They leverage AWS, and then they just pay for what they use on AWS. We as Netflix end users, we don't even know where Netflix is running. All we know is that when we need a movie, we just know that Netflix has millions of movies on their platform. And anytime you want to watch a movie, you never have a situation where it says that, sorry, this movie, you can't stream it because too many people are streaming it, unless it's not available in your region, right? Which that one has to do with the way Netflix has set up their own company. So what I'm saying is that we have what we call availability zones with the cloud providers. So cloud providers have their regions where they operate. London, for example, Cape Town. And within those regions, they actually have isolated data centers. So, for example, within London, they can have a group of data centers in East London. They can have a group of data centers in West London, right? So those are what we call availability zones, and this is what they look like. So these are buildings with, servers and all of that, where within regions that AWS actually operates. So that way, if you want to build an application and all your end users are in London, when you're building the application, you just select the London region and you deploy it there. So for example, you want to build an application and then you deploy it. Let's say, for example, you want to build an application, all your customers are in Nigeria. So if AWS currently doesn't have a region in Nigeria, but the closest region is Cape Town, South Africa, which is quite new as well. It was just a few years down the line that they did it, that they had a region there. So what you do is that you deploy your application to the region that is closest to where your customers are, right? So and then so that's it for availability zones. So within regions, we have availability zones. So each region can have 2 availability or 3 availability zones. And then, so a region, like I said, a geographical location within a country like London, for example, we have London, which is EU West 2 region. And then availability zone is a building with tens of thousands of servers. So those availability zones are grouped, right? Availability zone in North London, availability zone in South London. So each AWS region has 2 or more availability zones, and availability zones consist of data centers or groups of data center. Now, how do you determine your AWS region? This is also something important. This is my final slide, right? I was talking about when you're deploying an application, you have to think about where your customers are. I also talked about how cloud computing is really good for disaster recovery. It is because of this concept of region and availability zones. So anything you build on the cloud, you actually have to specify, do you want it to, what region? Because the data has to reside somewhere physically, even though you're not the one managing it. So things to consider when you're choosing your AWS region, you need to think of data sovereignty laws. This is very important because it was a blocker for many people for many years. Particularly financial service, and I shared this a lot because this was my experience. I remember as far back as 2020, when we were going to organizations, I was working in Accenture then, and then we would speak to different organizations and tell them that, oh, we want them to move their systems to the cloud and all of that. This was really, really early days of cloud computing. And they'll tell us that's not possible. We're not going to move our data to somebody else's computer. And some of them, the restriction that they had, especially federal government, banks, and all of that. I'm sure some of you have heard of GDPR laws, right? There are actually some countries that are very strict on their country's data. So, for example, in the UK, there's a way you have to process UK residents' data. There's a way you have to process, data that is collected in the UK. So data sovereignty laws are very important for you as a cloud engineer. So if you are building something that is going to involve collecting data of people in the UK, then there are probably restrictions around, making sure that data resides in the UK. So in that case, you can't build an application that is collecting UK people's data and then deploy it in a region in South Africa. You've broken a federal law. And it's punishing. I don't know what the offense is, but you're actually in breach of the GDPR law. So as a cloud architect, these are things you have to be familiar with as well. So data sovereignty law is important. Are there restrictions around where your data can reside? Are there any federal requirements? So that actually is within the boundary of where you function. Some countries don't mind. Some organizations, they don't mind. You can collect their data and process it somewhere else. It's not a problem. So these are things you need to think about. You need to think about latency to end users as well. Where are majority of my end users? You can't build an application because you're in Nigeria. If you are building an application and everybody that's going to use the application, you're building it for Chinese people. You can't say because you're in Nigeria, you deploy the application in South Africa. No, you have to think of how far is it? Where are my end users, right? And latency is how long it takes for them to get a response back. So you focus on the end users. My end users are in China. So as I'm building, I'm going to select China region. Now you need to think of AWS services as well. What regions have your required services? There's some services that you know, are not available in some regions. So you need to think about that. And then you need to think of the pricing as well. There's some regions that are more expensive than other regions. So AWS is very transparent about this. So they would put it on their page. So these are things that you consider as a cloud architect. There's so much more to cloud computing, but this is just to lay the foundation and get you to start thinking as a cloud architect, understand what is available, right, for you as a cloud engineer. So we also have what we call, okay, I know I promised you that was my that was my last slide. But yeah, let me just talk briefly on edge location because I'm sure some of you may have this question, right? So how about you really want to deploy something and you know you want to deploy it in a place where AWS doesn't have a region, doesn't have a presence. So we have what we call an edge location as well. You know, it's an endpoint that is used to cache or store content. So let's say, for example, you live in Australia and you need to access a file that is based on an AWS website in London. What happens is that because you're in Australia and you have accessed that file that is in London, right? That file, if you have enabled this feature in AWS, you've enabled CloudFront, you want to use edge locations. So what happens is that that file actually gets cached, it gets stored in Australia. So that way, anybody in Australia that needs it can access that file very quickly. So what I'm trying to say is that there are places where, so these edge locations, think of it like mini computers in different parts of the world, right? So even though AWS doesn't have a presence, they don't have a region in that particular, they don't have data centers in that particular region, right? If you enable edge locations, there's a way AWS handles this as well, such that even if, let's say, for example, I mean, I'm giving the example of Australia, let me stay on that example so it doesn't get confusing. You live in Australia, right? And let's say AWS doesn't have a presence in Australia. You've enabled CloudFront, you've enabled edge location. So what happens is that somebody in Australia, you access that video is being fed, whatever file you're accessing is being fed from wherever it is that it's actually based. So if the cloud architects has actually built they've deployed their website or they've deployed their website in London, whoever is accessing from Australia actually has to get that data from London, even though of course as an end user you don't know what's going on, right? You are just accessing a particular website and you're trying to load a video. So once you've done that once and edge location is enabled, anybody else within Australia that needs to access that video, they just access it from the edge location where the video has been cached. The advantage of this is that, of course, latency then doesn't become a problem because if everybody in Australia has to stream the video directly from London every time, there's always a time gap, between when the video gets fed from London to Australia. Even though this time is very small, I always say that when you're dealing with large volumes of video, large files, then distances in the world of tech becomes very, very, very relevant. So it's just something to be aware of. So as much as AWS has regions, within those regions, they have availability zones. AWS also currently, they have over 700 edge locations all across the globe, right? Such that if you need this feature to be enabled, you can actually use it. So edge locations are used to get content closer to our end users for better performance. So that's edge location, and that's the end of the first part of my lecture. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them before we take our first 10 minutes break, and then we go to the second lecture for today. But just as a recap, today we've actually looked at cloud computing, what exactly cloud computing is, and you guys have told me that you understand it, right? We've looked at the advantages of cloud computing. We've talked about why you need to learn cloud computing. Why do we teach AWS? It lays the foundation for other cloud providers as well. We've looked at the AWS global infrastructure, the concept of regions, the concept of availability zones, the concept of edge locations, and how you determine what region you're going to use, to deploy whatever application you're building on the cloud. So do we have any questions? Questions make me know that you're actually following and you're interested in this topic. Any questions, guys? Any questions at all? You can actually unmute since we finished the lecture if you want to ask a question. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sheila is saying, okay, Frances, go on. I'll come back to Sheila's question.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the lecture. I was just not clear with the edge location. I understand the availability zone, but I'm not clear about the edge locations.
Okay, okay, that's fine. I'll go over it again. Um, let's look at Sheila. Sheila is saying how much coding is involved. I guess how much coding is involved in cloud engineering, right? That's your question. And I'm sure, I don't know, Sheila, maybe you're asking this question because you think, oh, maybe coding is difficult. Well, the first thing I will say is that minimal coding, even though yes, there is some coding. I know that there's some things that will be like, oh, come and do tech. There's no coding there and all of that. There is some, okay, it's a private, oh, okay, I didn't realize it's a private question, but that's fine. I've read it out already anyway. So you're probably asking because you're thinking that coding is difficult. Do you need maths to be a cloud DevOps engineer? So in terms of coding, minimal coding is involved, right? And we teach you everything that you need. So for example, you need to at least know some Linux scripting, you need to know some Python, right? With Linux, Python, Bash scripting, you're fine in the world of cloud. And these things can be learned from scratch. There's nothing that you cannot figure out. There's nothing that you cannot understand. That's why we're here to teach you. So I don't want you to be intimidated by, oh, because there is some coding involved, right? I always say that the more difficult it is for you to learn something, it puts you in a class where you're becoming a lot more valuable. If you learn what everyone else is running away from, right, you put yourself in a position where when they're looking for somebody that has that skill, they come for you because you have that skill already. So there is some coding involved. You can learn it. It's not, it can be figured out. You can learn it. And then you don't need to know, you don't need maths as it is to be a cloud engineer. See, what you need to become a cloud DevOps engineer, you just need to be ready and determined. A lot of things is just, and you have to believe that you can see you can figure out so many of these things, like for lack of a better, like it's common sense, right? And everyone has it. I don't even believe that anybody cannot learn anything. I don't care what your background is, whether you finished with third class or what, it does not matter. That just describes a particular aspect of your life, right? Life has moved on from there. So I don't care what your background is. Are you interested? Are you willing to give it what it takes? You can ask our graduates at Cloud Booster. That's what we do. That's why we have people who have done accounting, who have come from different backgrounds and they've excelled in this field because they were ready for it. So you don't need maths as it is, but the key thing is that you just need to be interested in cloud computing and be ready to give you what it takes, of course, and you get there. No, coding is not difficult. I don't believe coding is difficult. I don't even believe anything is difficult. Anything can be figured out. You can figure it out. Well, it may be a bit challenging because it's something new. It's something, I mean, you're trying to understand, you're trying to learn a different language. It's just like if you're Yoruba and you're trying to learn to speak Igbo, right? It doesn't mean Igbo language in itself is, or maybe you're trying to learn Hausa. Let me use Hausa because people generally just believe Hausa is there, it's just like when we're in school. There are some subjects that I thought was difficult, and I'm sure all of you can bear me witness. I used to think chemistry was difficult until my chemistry teacher changed. Till today, I'm still very close to my chemistry teacher because he made me fall in love with chemistry and I eventually had an A. So it's about who is teaching you, right? How do they break down the concept and about you accepting that you can learn it. That's my mindset towards it. Okay, so let's go back to edge location, right? The concept of edge location for the sake of Frances and anyone else who may not understand what I was saying. So an edge location is an endpoint that is used to cache or store content, right? So with an edge location, the purpose of an edge location is storing content, right? So if, for example, if you actually design a website and your website has videos, has pictures on it, all of that detail has to be stored somewhere, right? So it's not arbitrary. So there was a time my personal brand website, I created my website, you will see my picture on it, blah blah blah. You also see some videos on it, but all of the videos, the pictures, they have to be stored somewhere. And there was time that I created an S3 bucket, and then that was where all of that was stored. So any website that you load, right? If you have even the text, I am going to do it today because you're doing static web hosting today. So you will notice that the files where your website is being fed for, they actually have to be stored somewhere. So you can choose to store it in an S3 bucket. And that S3 bucket needs to sit in a particular region. So you can actually have a website that is like the website, all the content of that website is actually based in a particular region. And in this case, I'm giving an example of you have a website that has been designed and all of the video, the images, and all of that is actually stored in London region. So if somebody in Australia wants to access your website, what happens is that you as a cloud architect who has designed your website in London, you're the one that knows what is going on. So you've kept all your data in London, right? The person in Australia doesn't know what's good. They're just clicking a website, they're opening it, the image is opening, the video is opening. And in some cases, you know that you actually open website, you open some website sometimes and it doesn't load and it says that, oh, too many people are accessing it, and then it gives you all sorts of errors, so that hasn't been built properly. So now if you want to use this edge location feature, so you can actually tell AWS that, you know what, for the first time, if somebody is accessing my website, which resides in London, if someone from Australia is accessing it, right, you can choose that each time somebody in Australia logs in, they access all that file from London. But the thing is that there will be latency involved because it's going to take a while for data to be transmitted from London to Australia, albeit milliseconds, right? It's milliseconds we're dealing with here. But because it's far in terms of distance, right? Technology distance as well. Like I said, we're talking about milliseconds here. So to avoid a scenario where everybody in Australia, if there's so many people that are going to access the video from Australia or your website from Australia, why does everyone need to access it all the way from London? And then information is being passed across from London to Australia, from London to someone else in Australia again, from London to another person in Australia again. You can use what we call edge locations. So the first time somebody accesses all the content of the website is stored within an edge location in Australia, right? So everyone else that needs to feed from that website, everybody else that clicks on that website, they're just accessing it from the edge location where the content has been stored in Australia. So that way, it's only an Australia to Australia distance that we're dealing with. So you can actually move from 100 milliseconds to 10 milliseconds in terms of accessing, such a website. So this is actually it's not every time you use this in cloud computing, it's just for you to know that it's available, right? You can do, it's part of what we call the content delivery network, is a way to build things if it's going to cause a major issue for you to really have information to be traveling from nation to nation. This is something that you can enable. Frances, is that clearer?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Oh, no problem at all. All right. Do we have any other question? Okay, even Felix is saying yes, it is. So I'm glad that Frances spoke on behalf of any other person that may not have understood it the first time. Okay. I hope I've answered the question. Fortune is like, coding is difficult. It's not difficult, trust me. You're right. It's about who's teaching you and being able to access everything that you need on that journey. All right. So any other questions? Any other questions? Do you ever use JavaScript? Not directly. Like you don't have today, you're actually going to have a file that is JavaScript, but JavaScript is majorly for front-end developers. So it's not you don't have to learn JavaScript because you're a cloud engineer. No. Sometimes it's just for you to even just be conversant. So if you see a JavaScript file, you can say, oh, this is a JavaScript file. You're not using it. You're like today, like I said, you're going to actually load from a JavaScript because you're building a website, right? You see the application today. Are we learning tools like, I have a background in software engineering. Oh, nice. Is that Rochelle or Rochelle? Okay, beautiful. Sam says, are we learning tools like Terraform, Kubernetes, Jenkins? Of course you are. And I'll talk to you about all the tools you're going to learn at the end of today's bootcamp. Okay, so yeah, but you are definitely learning all the DevOps tools, all the cloud tools that you need.
Thank you very much, Wemisola. Okay, so I'm a bit confused when you were talking about the availability zones. So you mentioned that, okay, now, so instead of individuals being the ones managing the back end data, right? So
Yeah.
so those companies now that have those that manages it at the availability zones. So now I thought about what you mentioned about when there is all these servers room for physical data before cloud computing became a thing, that it's not like that reliable like cloud computing is right now, like storing your data on cloud. So now how about those companies? Does it mean that um those datas that are being managed by those companies are those availability zones, that nothing can happen to it? Is it like it's very reliable? Because now you mentioned, or is it because it's now being overseen by a company, so now it's safer? I
Good
don't know if you
question.
understand my question.
Good question. Good question. Yeah, I understand your question. So let me paint another scenario for you. Because we have global cloud providers, right? You have more options. If, for example, you run a startup, right, and you decide to use physical servers, so you're limited in terms of you probably have to keep that server in a particular location. Maybe your company is in Nigeria, is in Ibadan, for example. So you have a small startup, you have your physical server. So you have to put that server somewhere in Ibadan, right? So you have that server with you in Ibadan, in one location, right? So that automatically even limits you already. If something should happen, your company catches fire or whatnot, everything you have in that server that is in one location gets blown out completely. Now, if we tell you move that data to the cloud, one of the many advantages is high availability. So for a start, there's nothing that you deploy on the cloud that you just keep in one place because of how versatile the cloud is. In fact, when you're building databases on the cloud, there are what we call read replica types of databases. There are different ways that you can set up your database, such that as your database is writing to a particular database, as your data is being copied to a particular database, a backup of it is being saved to another server in another location, right? So there is so much you can do. You're building an application, for example, you can decide that I want to build this application in 2 different availability zones. So even though you're in Ibadan, for example, you can say availability zone Mokola, for example, availability zone Bodija. I'm just giving this example, right? So if anything should happen to what is in Bodija, like, it doesn't change the fact that you still have backup in Mokola. And the same thing with London, right? You decide that I want to build my application, I'm using the London region. You can choose 2 different availabilities or even 3. So even if worst case scenario, natural disaster happens and all of that, South London goes completely down, what happens is that you still have backup in North London, you still have backup in West London. So one of the many examples is that one of the many advantages of moving away from servers, physical servers, and actually moving to a global cloud provider is that you can easily manage, you can easily scale, you can work with as many regions as you want without having to imagine. You as a startup, you now have to, if you want to do that in the actual sense, you will have to have a server in North London. You will now go and put another server in South London again. You will now have to go and put another server in, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't, as a little startup, you're going to spend so much money, it's so expensive for you to do that. But a global cloud provider already has availability zones in different parts of the world. All you need to do is to click it on you just sit on your laptop and click, okay, I want to deploy this application in this region, and you select availability zone, and then it's done that way. Does that answer your question, Fortune? So, and again, this is not just the only advantage. There are many things. We've talked about scalability, we've talked about unlimited stuff, we've talked about pay as you go, we talked about, very good. All right, let's go on a 10 minutes break. We'll come back and we go into the second part of the lecture. Thank you, everyone. It's been quite engaging. Thank you.